Chapter 1492. That terrible sound. The Krath were in a frenzy. Move back, Thulsis bellowed, phlegm and mucus flying from his lips as he glared down at the others. He loomed large over them, radiating power and authority, yet he did not get the reaction he expected. Some were cowed, especially those from his own tribe, the Gluzgith, who had traveled from the heart to come to this blighted place, but others still roared back at him, foaming at the mouth. Can't you hear it? It's cleansing filth. I'll tear it apart. I can't take it. I can't take it. The last Krath, frothing with anger, eyes bulging to the point it seemed they might burst, lashed out, no longer able to contain their rage. Almost blind with anger, they sank their fangs into the Krath beside them, who screeched and retaliated in kind. In moments, the entire scene would descend into chaos, Krath tearing each other apart in an orgy of violence that would kill dozens. The Krathlathe of the Gluzgith sucked in a breath and let the rage boil in his voice. Be still, or I will tear you apart. He roared, the threat resonating in the air as the thick, acrid scent of his unfathomably concentrated acid spread. He moved amongst the crowd, daring them to defy him, his maw gaping wide to reveal his enormous fangs. It was difficult for them, he could see that they were deep in the grip of the rage, and he didn't blame them, he felt exactly the same. When finally the last of the crowd had been cowed, Thulsis moved decisively. As the leader of the undisputed largest tribe in the area, his presence commanded respect. Get them out of here, he commanded the various Krathlathe of the smaller tribes in attendance. Move to the first staging ground. That should be far enough from the fortress. Has the way been made safe? Ulis demanded. If you don't leave, you will find this place will grow increasingly unsafe, Thulsis growled. Ulis, Krathlathe of the Bulg, understood him immediately. With the help of the others, they were able to keep the slugs in line long enough to get them moving away from the fortress. Thulsis, along with the other Krath who were strong enough of will to resist the rage, waited to ensure that nothing went wrong as the other tribes withdrew. All the while, the singing resonated in their minds. Pure, clean sounds rang like peals of unsullied water, washing against their thoughts and trying to soothe their souls. Endlessly, effortlessly, the song invaded, calling, seeking, desperately crying out for acceptance and peace. They hated it. Like needles poking them right in their guts, the song was intolerable to every Krath that heard it. Its purity offended them. Its appeal disgusted them. Its cleanliness was so rage-inducing, no Krath could possibly endure it. Should they remain in its presence any longer, they would tear each other apart before they managed to reorganize any sort of assault on the fortress. Whatever the song was, it was inimical to the Krath. Theorazin was right to seek its destruction. If we can't endure the song any longer, then how are we going to attack the fortress? Chost demanded. Of all the various Krathlathe of these minor tribes, Thulsis approved of Chost the most. She was a real Krath, determined, vicious and brutal, eager to do the work of the ancient and visit innumerable horrors upon her enemies. We will have to work on a countermeasure, he replied. We can endure the song for a time, but every slug has its limits. If it doesn't stop, we will need to find a way to block it out until we can get inside the fortress and eat whatever is creating the dreadful racket. The massive slug didn't even have adequate words to describe how much the song repelled him. It was antithetical to his senses, and every cell in his body cried out to annihilate the creatures responsible. The acid within his body stirred and burned with every note, searing his flesh and burning in his throat. He turned away from the fortress before he lost control and surged toward it in a fit of blind rage. Have the others retreated? He grated out. We're only waiting for the slugs we sent down to retrieve the body of the ant, Chost told him. They should be here shortly. They'd have to be quick, otherwise they too might have succumbed to the song. Just as he was thinking it, the large Krathlathe sensed movement nearby and turned to see a group of slugs dragging up something from below. Whatever it was, pulling it up the sheer vertical surface that plunged down into the depths below was clearly a chore and a half. Chost's eyes glittered as she looked at them, particularly at the sturdy scout at their head. Zaluth, good of you to finally join us. The slug, Zaluth, grinned savagely. It would have been easier if you'd stayed and helped lift this cursed creature. You had no problems with the song? Thulsis asked, cutting through the useless chatter. Zaluth spat a wad of acid onto the ground. Nothing we couldn't handle, he said. Could I ask you mighty Krathlathe to help us pull this thing? It's unbelievably heavy. Chapter 1493. Choir of the Colony. There was a rising sense of urgency amongst the brood tenders. They worked as they always did, with a sense of calm and control. They were the most critical workers in the entire colony, tasked with the greatest responsibility, to care for and raise the future generations. They were an unshakable force whose cool and calm was impossible to rattle. Yet this situation was unlike anything the Rhysand had seen before. The young Chow would simply not stop singing. The tenders had tried to distract them. It didn't work. They'd encourage them to sleep, to no avail. Offering them toys, or activities, or food, none of it had worked. Being so exhausted, they were beginning to droop and fall over, passing out as they became overwhelmed with fatigue. The Rhysand herself had led an effort to communicate with the hatchlings via performative dance, but the attempt had failed miserably, the young Chow not even acknowledging their efforts. If the situation continued for much longer, the young ones might suffer permanent damage to their voices. Thinking of the stress and suffering her charges were enduring was enough to cause the Rhysand to grind her mandibles in frustration. This was entirely intolerable to the brood tenders. They had to do something. And yet, no matter what they tried, nothing worked. They were down to one final idea, little as they believed in it. "We have no choice," the Rhysand announced. According to the colony's singular music expert, the Chow are calling out to someone, hoping for a reply. If that's the case, we will need to create that reply ourselves. Mozant, she snapped. Alone in the corner, antennae gently swaying in the air as she listened to the music, the ant jumped. Wah, what? You must write a reply to the hatchlings. Quickly, we will find a way to perform it and hope that they are satisfied. Me, Mozant said, aghast. Write the music. I am unworthy. Who else can do it? The Rhysand demanded, her normal calm, nurturing attitude fracturing in the heat of the moment. The rest of us have only understood the basic elements of musical structure that we've taught to the young ones. None of us can write music. Only you can. But you don't understand. Their song is such a thing of beauty. Anything I wrote would only sully it. It doesn't have to be perfect, it only has to satisfy the hatchlings, the Rhysand replied, impatient. Or are you satisfied to watch as they sing themselves unconscious? Despite her reservations, Mozant was still a brood tender, she could not bear to let the young suffer. Gritting her mandibles, she firmed her will. Very well, I will try. Clear me a space. A space, I said. I must create. So saying, Mozant swept back the shock of white hair atop her head, causing it to fuzz up wildly as the writing materials of the colony were summoned for her to begin. So began a nervous wait as the brood tenders continued to do all they could to ensure the hatchlings were comfortable while Mozant underwent her creative process. As it turned out, it was quite a process. Disgusting. Appalling. It makes me sick, she roared, throwing the piece she had been working to the side with a violent sweep of a foreleg. No, 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 no. This isn't right, not right at all. She dragged her white hair through the elbow joints of her forelegs, a soothing and cleaning gesture as she continued to rant to herself. If I come so crudely over the top of their own harmony, it will seem like dominance, a demand for submission and obedience. It should be a partnership, a joining of equals striving towards a common goal. So where do I harmonize? I could move an octave down, be a strong supporting influence, or perhaps sing a counter-harmony that interlaces with their own. How would that sound? How would it sound? Flailing wildly, Mozant rolled around on the ground, legs kicking and antennae flailing. Several tenders moved to see if she was all right, but she pushed them all away. No, shut up, I think I have something. Throwing herself back to her desk, she began to write a new song, using her scent gland to mark the special tablets used by the colony. Yes, I can hear it, the notes are flowing out endlessly. It's so beautiful. In the back of her mind, Mozant made a note that she should add tear ducts in her next evolution so she could weep with joy, as the humans did. Except, a few minutes later. No, it's garbage. How could I ever imagine that this was good? It's filth. Disgusting. With another wild fling of her legs, she swept her work on the floor and tried to stomp on it, only to find she was too weak to destroy the reinforced stone with flimsy ant legs. Giving up, she once again flung herself on the floor, rolling and flailing until once again, inspiration struck. Desperate to break the cycle and make some progress, the Rhysand watched and waited. Mozant's work was getting better, it took longer and longer for her to throw it away after each revision, but if they waited until she produced something she was actually happy with, the Chow would have collapsed, or perhaps worse. The next time Mozant went to destroy her work, the Rhysand lunged and deftly snatched it out of the air with her mandibles. Turning swiftly, she passed it to another brood tender waiting at the door to the chamber. Take it and get copies made. Prepare the singers, she ordered, passing the tablet. Without hesitation, the tender raced away, just quick enough to avoid Mozant's diving lunge. No, no, it's sewerage, you hear me, raw sewerage. Singing it to the chow will be like pouring foul muck into their ears. Bring it back, we don't have time, the Rhysand snapped. Get yourself together and go help prepare the singers. We're doing this now. Of course, the ants couldn't perform the music, even if one of them wrote it. They had no way to vocalize, singing was entirely out of the question. Yet, they could put on the same charade they had been doing for weeks, pretending to sing as they taught music theory to the chow while others provided their voices to the act. This would be no different. To the Rhysand, stepping into the chamber was a painful experience. The song of the chow might not have made sense to her, she may not have heard it as others might, but even so, she could feel its power. Despite their flagging strength, the little snails had pure, piercing voices, and their hope and sorrow rang in the air clear as a bell. Even more than their song, their tiny, wilting selves gave the tenders who saw them great pain. This is going to work, the Rhysand thought to herself. This has to work. Reluctantly, Mozant took up her position before the gathered brood tenders, who had arranged themselves as a choir, facing the little snails. Although it pains me, she grumbled, we don't have time to rehearse. Try to follow my instructions while you pretend to sing so it looks more convincing. In 5, 4, 3, 2. Chapter 1494, Unification. Mozant was unspeakably nervous. She had been designated as the tender with the most musical mind, her work on the curriculum for the hatchlings being the best of any of the ants. As such, she had been chosen to evolve and expand her musical capacity, to take mutations and skills that would expand her mastery of sound, something the colony knew and cared little about. It had been a liberating experience. Free to pursue this one subject to its limits, she had been able to unleash all of her passion, all of her drive and dedication toward music. She studied composition, she composed, she pestered the experts the colony had summoned day and night. Her expertise had grown rapidly in a short time, and yet, she felt she was no closer to actually understanding it than she had been before. It was hard, it made no sense. Why did things sound good to some people, and not to others? Sometimes the notes were mathematically pleasing, vibrations spaced at even distances along frequency spectrums to create chords and harmonies. Other times, they were not, discordant notes sending shivers running along her carapace. She had developed 1,000 strong opinions about music during the course of her learning, only to throw all of them away. And now, they were going to perform her work for the chow. Her disgusting, inferior work. To a musician, the chow were like creatures of light and magic. Even newly hatched, they were able to sing and weave harmonies with only the bare minimum of training. They were a race capable of literally changing the world with song, for goodness sake. She knew they were going to hate her work. Having it performed in front of them was like having nails scraping the inside of Mozant's carapace. Intolerable, but she would tolerate it anyway, for the sake of the little ones. After counting down, it began. The ants arrayed in front of her were not performing, because of course they weren't. Behind the arrayed ant choir stood a glass panel, opaque on this side, but quite see-through on the other. Beyond that stood the real choir, a gathering of humans, Bruinchi, the odd Setsula and even a few Magpie, the most gifted and well-trained musicians the colony could find on short notice. It was to them that Mozant looked and directed her gestures. The chow continued to sing their little hearts out, a sorrowful melody that rose and fell along with their hopes. Despite their flagging energy, some of the snails quite literally flat on the ground, yet still they were singing, still hoping. She had heard it enough times to know it like the back of her mandibles. Each of the fine hairs sprouting from the top of her head was alive with the vibrations of their song. She could feel it, tickling at the edges of her brain. She raised her forelegs and, with a sweeping gesture, brought the choir in. The Rhysand and the others did a workable job with their miming, but more importantly, the real choir did well to follow her lead, their sound flowing through the panels open around the window and filtering into the snailcare center. Softly at first, her song was light and delicate. A sprinkling of notes, a counterpoint that emphasized the sorrow and hope of the snail's own song. Yes, you are alone and you do not want to be. I know that. Your sadness is my sadness, Mozant was trying to say. The chow did not react, continuing to sing as they had before. Mozant had half expected them to turn and vomit, purging themselves of their stomach's contents along with the horrid feeling of disgust her music no doubt caused them, but they did not. A good sign or not, she couldn't say. She continued to sweep her forelegs, guiding and directing the singers who had been given almost no time to familiarize themselves with the music. It rose now, slowly, cautiously, interweaving itself with the snail song, a swelling wave that rose from beneath, supporting and strengthening. With a firm foundation, the soaring exhortation of the Chal became even more powerful, more pure. It pierced Mozant in the heart, igniting her very spirit with fire and sending tingling waves coursing through her entire body. Yes, yes, it was working. With each moment that passed, she became more immersed in the music. The shame and disgust began to recede, replaced by an overflowing energy that she could not describe. Her movements became sharper and sharper, her hair whipping from side to side as she conducted the choir. She couldn't see anymore, her brain simply paid no attention to visual information. What use was it? What was the point? She wanted to hear, wanted to feel. Now came the critical moment. With a sharp gesture, Mozant brought her legs low, cutting off the choir completely. Then, slowly, she raised them again, urging the singers to come with her, to rise to the occasion. She had told the Chal that she understood their pain, that they were supported and loved. Now she needed to tell them that they were not alone, that the partnership they sought was right in front of them all along. Desperate to continue their miming, the brood tenders were holding on as best they could, but they couldn't sing, couldn't understand the power of what Mozant was doing. For those behind the window, she knew they felt it the same way she did, and it shook her right to her core. Once more the choir rose up, no longer supporting the Chal, no longer holding firm beneath their melody, but interweaving with it, filling in those gaps the snails had deliberately left open. They wanted someone to sing with them, someone to come and complete the music they had made. Mozant wanted to tell them, we are here. The colony is here, we will sing with you. It wasn't perfect, there were mistakes, burrs in the song that stabbed Mozant deeply, but she pushed forward, refusing to let the blemishes bring her out of the haze she had found herself in. Surrounded by beautiful sounds, she felt her consciousness rise to a higher plane, into a world of sound and light. With growing confidence, the choir repeated the refrain, their own song dancing around that of the snails, rising when theirs fell, retreating when they rose. For every call, there was a response, for every question, there was an answer. As desperately as Mozant wanted to turn and look at the Chal, she knew it was pointless, as she had abandoned her eyes. Only the sound mattered, only that. And, the Chal, their song was changing. It was subtle, but slowly an evolution was taking place. It was growing, sadder. At first, Mozant was plunged into the depths of despair. Her music, her awful, putrid music. It had wounded their ears and spirits. However, the more she listened, the more she realized this wasn't the case. The Chal were no longer asking as powerfully as before, their seeking questions had become muted as if they no longer expected a reply. Instead, their voices were filled with melancholy, minor notes in falling arpeggios spoke of a deep sadness the hatchlings felt, knowing they would never get the answer that they had hoped for. And yet, they had received an answer. As the questions fell away, the sadness gave way to acceptance. Effortlessly, the Chal switched up their song in unison, a transition to a soft major key to support the higher registers still descending in minor. There was hope, there was a quiet joy, there was a letting go. And then, the sound cut off entirely. Shocked, Mozant froze, only to sweep her legs sharply a moment later, cutting off her own choir. Where moments ago there had been heart-rending song, now there hung a heavy silence, so profound it seemed as if all the sound in the world had been sucked away. Pulled out of her trance, Mozant swung around wildly to see the little snails, exhausted and pale, some trembling with fatigue, looking at her, at the other ants. Then, as if nothing had happened, they turned and began to slide away, curling into the beds the tenders had placed nearby and retreating into their shells. Except for one, the little snail, clearly exhausted, slid toward Mozant slowly, and she stepped towards it, wanting to help. The little snail was crystal blue, with eyes that shone like stars, its shell the color of a glittering rainbow. Its mustache of pure white was disheveled after its efforts, yet still provided an air of grace and wisdom to the young creature. Mozant leant down, reaching toward the hatchling. What did it want? What did it have to say? When it was close enough, the snail looked up and, after a pause, trilled a few short notes at the much larger ant. Then, slowly, painfully, it turned and began to slide to the beds where the others were already sleeping. Mozant, frozen in place, felt those notes rumble through her head like thunder. Is it over? Mozant, is everything all right? Delighted that the Chal were going to sleep, had finally stopped singing, the Rhysant rushed to her fellow tender and shook her on the shoulder, finding her totally unresponsive. Only for the white-haired ant to fling herself on the ground, writhing and kicking. Of course. It's so obvious. My melody was such garbage, and they knew it all along. Chapter 1495. Go with the flow. You might think there's nothing to do when you're wrapped up in a cocoon of slime and being rolled around the dungeon, heading toward a slime pool of doom created by a god monster several thousand years old, and you'd be right. At least I had people to talk to. Chrysalis, for the last time, I am not letting you live inside me. Stop asking, it's never going to happen. I wouldn't ask if you stopped getting in trouble like this, she told me primly. You make all of us worry, and how can we help you if you won't let us close to you? This again. Everyone wants to babysit me, the colony, my own pets. I didn't have to worry about anything like this when I was a human. In fact, nobody paid much attention to me at all. There's a difference between being close to me and inside my body. My carapace is not a house. Maybe it should be. Not happening. Chrysalis goes back to sulking and I can't help but sigh. I don't want to make her upset, but at the same time I don't want to have a ball of endless darkness and horror living inside me. My carapace is for me, it's not such an outrageous demand. I am going to have to make some sort of concession eventually. The fact that I do keep ending up in these situations is true, after all. Well, it's not that bad. I'm surrounded by the mana equivalent of deadly toxin, sure, but it isn't getting through to me right now. On top of that, I'm starting to win the war against the poisonous mana that already seeped within me, which is also a plus. My wounds are healing, I'm reducing the amount of toxin inside me, this is all a win. Well, it would be if I weren't being steadily moved further and further away from the fortress. I'm still easily in range of the vestibule, but I won't be forever. Once I lose contact with the fortress, things are going to get pretty dangerous. Out here, I'm fairly helpless. If I break the slime cocoon, I'll be bombarded with a lethal dose of toxic mana in minutes. Once the wave subsides and the concentration of energy falls, I can jump out of here and kick Slug backside, no problems. Until then, I kind of have to stay put. Hey, Solent, how are things going over there? I reach out to the little general using my knave, just to avoid having to keep arguing with Chrysalis. Also because I'm bored. Busy, she says curtly. Would you care to elaborate? No. How rude. Why does she think I'm out here in the first place? I fell off that platform, fighting to the last, to keep my siblings safe. I mean really, oi, I think you can spare a thought or two, don't you? I'm really bored out here. There comes a long mental sigh, and I feel her thoughts slowly turn towards me, like a queen ant turning toward a particularly lively grub. Yes, she says. Yeesh, you are getting such a thwacking when I get back. Opening square bracket ... This does not insensitivize me to ensure your safe return. You need incentive. Is this the sort of treatment I get from my own family? Of course not, Solent sighs. We will do everything we can to bring you back. I apologize if I seem rude, but there really is a great deal going on here. Quick update, then I'm out of your head. Very well. We continue to pull in as much power as we can process, which is increasing the strain on the already overloaded network. The vents are still spewing forth mana, clearly the Krath believe we won't be able to hold out forever, but so far we are containing the damage. Barely. That sounds dangerous. Without harnessing this energy, we will not be able to hit our quotas. It is necessary. Wouldn't want to miss a quota. Anything else? The battles on the platforms continue to become more and more difficult. We are suffering from severe attrition. I believe you hurt the Krath badly on your own platform, which has relieved the pressure there, but that doesn't mean they aren't pressing at the others. So far, we have managed to hold, but the situation is in flux. I am constantly moving battalions and adjusting tactics. In fact, I intend to head to one of the most pressed battlefields and take command myself. Oh shoot, is it really that bad? It is challenging, she allows, but we will win. Never in doubt. As promised, I cut the connection, thinking about what I've heard. Things are rough at the fortress, but they're holding on. They don't need to last that much longer, if our predictions are right. The wave has peaked already, so as long as it falls soon, all will be well. If not, then I need to figure something out, quick. Chapter 1496, Fury. Pets can be exceptionally powerful assets in the dungeon, and much has been written about them, but I find a great deal of the discourse settles on the expense of raising them. Some argue that pouring valuable cores into a pet is a wise investment, since delving the dungeon with a capable monster by your side makes the endeavor much safer. Others dismiss this attitude, saying that by the time the pet has become strong enough to assist on deep delves, the Person raising it has already spent so much they could have retired. This purely transactional attitude does not take into account all that a good pet can be. More than an asset, more than a tool, they can be a loyal companion and friend who will never turn their back on you. Indeed, they are incapable of it. Excerpt from Delving Tips by Bolson Smith. Tiny was furious. Not the usual, simmering anger that he channeled into his fists, but a deep burning, chest-thumping rage that pulled his lips back in a permanent snarl and sent waves of heat rolling through his chest. His friend the Little Eye could sense it as well. Be calmous, Little Eye urged him, but Tiny found it harder and harder to listen. Despite his inner conflict, the giant ape's fighting style had never been more disciplined or controlled. Elbows tight to his sides, his fists flickered out too fast to see and returned twice as fast. Compact, quick, Tiny wove his body in unpredictable patterns, his feet dancing across the diamond coating of the platform. Always perfectly balanced, able to shift his weight in any direction at any time. A poison-tipped spike flashed towards him and Tiny felt a surge of fury. With the slightest slip of his head, he allowed the projectile to blast by him. Lightning coiled around his shoulder, charge building until snap. His coiled muscles detonated like an explosion, the light around his fist blasting outwards along with a bolt of electricity that boomed with thunder. The target of his wrath was obliterated, seared by lightning and crushed by the impact of the light from his fist, but Tiny was already moving, weaving to another target, positioning his feet just so, rotating his body, shifting his weight. His right fist snapped out, the light forming and rocketing away so fast it looked like Tiny was launching flares into the fifth. Punch, punch, duck, shift, weave, punch, 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 lightning blast. Sweat poured down the bat-faced ape's leathery skin, soaking his fur and dripped off his brow. He couldn't maintain this for long, but he wouldn't stop, not until the anger was gone. You could've hurt yourself SSS, Little Eye warned him. Tiny roared. Thick ropes of electricity snaked around his upper arms, crackling and twisting as he unleashed the storm within himself. With a deafening boom, Tiny thrust his arms forward and sent a deadly arc of lightning into the faces of the oncoming monsters. They hissed and howled, but he didn't relent. His vision went white as his own eyes began to blaze with electric energy. His own body felt seared, dangerously burning within as his organs emptied out all of the potent lightning energy they'd gathered. Lightning surged, discharging from his palms in an endless surge as he bellowed his fury. When he finally ran out of energy, Tiny felt drained, the crackling light that normally filled him gone. His muscles steamed as the heat rolled off him in waves, his innards ached, probably singed by the sheer volume of lightning he'd pushed out. Physically weary, Tiny fell onto his backside, breathing deeply. In moments, the ants were on him, checking, healing, giving him comforting pats as they worked to make sure he hadn't taken any lasting harm. He let them, grateful for their help, but he paid them little mind, focused instead on the surging anger that still burned within him. I told us you, Little Eye said. Docent get them back. Closing square bracket. Know that, Tiny grunted back, curling his fingers into fists. He knew that, but it didn't help. Tiny knew he wasn't smart. There were things he was good at punching and there were things he was not, thinking about stuff that wasn't punching. Right now, his master and his sister had gone away, gone somewhere Tiny couldn't follow, and he didn't know how to get them back. A giant, bat-faced gorilla with unbreakable bones, wings of shadow and the power to shatter the hardest steel with his fists, Tiny was not used to feeling helpless. You're smart. You think how to get them back, he told his brother, Little Eye. I am SSSS. It will take SSS me times SSS. It ISSSS hard, but you needs SSSS to waits SSS. This was the same thing he had said before. Tiny knew it, he even accepted it, but it was hard. Try, and he would try. It wouldn't be easy to hold back his surging anger, but he would try. Hopefully his smarter brother was able to come up with something soon, because he didn't think he'd be able to hold on for long. If it came down to it, he would go out into the tunnels and he would punch everything that tried to keep him from his family. If monsters got in his way, he would punch them. If the sneaky slugs tried to stop him, he would punch them. If the nasty mana tried to slow him down, well, he would punch that too.